This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu Al-Samid.
Last one of the year, but we're not going to do one of those wrap-up things that everybody else is doing. Even so, we want to talk about what we're driving, and I still have the Ram, so nobody wants to hear me babble more about that.
Well, unless you have anything new to say about it.
I still really like it. It's a very nice truck. I might have been off about the price last week. I think this one actually is about $56,000. I might have said 46.
Okay.
You can get a Bighorn or a North Edition for 46. So yeah, good truck.
Is the 12-inch screen growing on you or getting more annoying?
Well, this one this one has.
Oh, you don't have the 12-inch, do you?
Right, it has the 8-inch screen, and that's okay. It's Uconnect. One of the weirdest things, though, is sometimes when you start it, it boots up very confused, and the audio system, it's almost like there's a malfunction with the the speed compensating volume thing, and it just if it's on one of the either FM or AM radio, it'll just smush the volume of what you're listening to. It does weird stuff, and you have to actually park, shut it off, open the door, close it, and make sure you've put it on XM before you start it again, and then it wakes up and it's fine. So I don't know.
I wonder if
the first time I've experienced that.
They've probably made some software updates, and there's probably a bug somewhere with the volume control system. Yeah,
that's my guess. Is it's probably not a big deal. It's annoying, but
you know what? There's this round knob that you can just give it a quick twist and fix that real fast. Well,
so that works, but the volume, it's something's going on where it's automatically adjusting gain on its own. So it gets that'll be fine, and then all of a sudden it'll just it'll back off whatever kind of limiting it's trying to do or whatever, and then it'll pound you with very loud audio, and then it'll sort of latch again. So I don't know what's up with that.
Have you tried going in and turning off speed compensating volume?
Yes.
And that didn't help?
Did not.
Okay.
So I don't know. I love the troubleshooting that we're working through, because that's really key. With anything, that whole troubleshooting process, and I didn't realize that there's a lot of people that don't know how to do that. Where they're like, okay, let's try this one thing. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try this other thing. Okay, that didn't work.
No.
I don't know.
See, the modern method of troubleshooting is you just go on Twitter and start whining about it.
I have not done that.
That's how you troubleshoot in 2018. You don't actually try to go through and understand what the root cause of the problem might be. You just go on Twitter and start saying that, Ram has totally screwed this up, and, it's a total piece of, crap.
Yeah.
But
yes.
That's or better yet, even doing it on Reddit.
Oh yeah. Oh. Speaking of Reddit and Twitter and stuff, there was was it Ed Niedermeyer who posted about somebody on Reddit complaining about their loaner from because they had to drop off their Tesla, and they're like, wait, there's buttons, there's tens of buttons.
Oh, yeah, because they got a car that wasn't a Tesla as a loaner. It was some conventional car.
Right. And I didn't realize, to go on a little bit of a tangent, I didn't realize that Tesla owners, like the hardcore cult members, they talk about any other car as an ICE, an internal combustion engine car. And it's like, you could make a car with an internal combustion engine operate just like a Tesla operates. That they're not. Yeah,
the user interface has nothing to do with the propulsion system.
Right. And I don't get me wrong. I think that Tesla's user interface does some interesting stuff, and they've streamlined some things, and
it also does some really terrible stuff.
Right. It's
but that's not unique to Tesla, though.
Correct. There's the good and the bad. And I just I was like, wow, this is my head hurts after reading this. But anyway, no, I haven't figured it out, but I also didn't want to slam FCA, because I'm sure that it's something that if they're not aware of it, once they are aware of it, they can figure out and fix. And
I'm sure Nick Capel will be right on it. He'll get it all fixed up for you.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, especially because the thing goes back soon. So, anyway, well, you're driving the Buick Regal TourX, right?
Yeah. So I spent the last week with the Regal TourX. You know, when Buick announced the new generation Regal last year, they surprised us all. You know, the previous generation Regal, which like this one is essentially a rebadged version of the Opel Insignia from Europe. You know, the last generation, they only brought it over as a 4-door sedan. In Europe, it was available as a 5-door hatchback, you know, which is, you know, more of a, it looked like the sedan, but, you know, it was sloping back. So, you know, it wasn't like a, you know, traditional, you know, short wagon hatchback, but, you know, more of like the Audi A5 Sportback style. And then they also had a wagon. And at one point back in the earlier part of this decade, I know GM was actually evaluating the wagon, bringing the wagon over here, and they never did for the previous generation. But when they launched this new one, they dropped the 4-door sedan version and went with just the Sportback, as they call the 5-door hatch, or the wagon. Except because Americans won't buy wagons, they branded it as the Regal TourX, and they actually call it a crossover, even though it's only sits an inch higher than the standard Sportback Regal. But it does have, you know, the matte black wheel arch extensions and, you know, a little bit of faux trim in the front fascia that, you know, kind of hints at the possibility of, you know, that it might sort of look like a skid plate under there. You know, not that you would ever take one of these, you know, on anything worse than a gravel road. You know, but it's a wagon. You know, call it whatever you want. It's a wagon, and frankly, it's a really good wagon. You know, I liked it a lot. There's a lot to like about this car. You know, I think it's a really good size, you know, for a mid-size family car. You know, it doesn't sit, you know, particularly tall, which personally is fine for me. I know a lot of customers today prefer something that sits up higher. But, you know, this in a lot of ways, you know, this is kind of equivalent to something like an Audi Allroad or a Volvo V60 cross country, not the XC60, but the V60 cross country. It's similar in size to those. It's actually a little bit longer, a little bit larger than those two cars, but, you know, it's the same basic idea, or, you know, maybe a more premium Subaru Outback wagon. You know, all the same basic concept where you've taken a station wagon, lifted it a little bit, you know, given it some design cues that, you know, make it look a little more SUV like. Unfortunately, compared to all of those competitors, Americans for some reason just have not taken to this car, which is sad because it's really good.
Well, you know, I think the actual buyer for this car is possibly that small subset of people who once bought Saabs and now have no Saabs to buy. And this is your last gen, like this is the most modern Saab you can buy. It's still based on the same stuff that the 9.3 was, or at least an evolution of that. And it's a weird little brand. So, you know, you should flock to it, but there's just not that many of them.
Yeah. And, you know, so far through October of this year, you know, GM had only sold 11,000 Regals in the U.S., you know, which is not much. You know, I mean, they stopped build with the current generation. They stopped building them in North America, and they're importing them from Europe, from Germany, where they're built alongside the Insignia. And given that since launching this car, GM has sold off Opel and Vauxhall to PSA, it's unclear how long they're going to want to keep sourcing these cars from Germany. And although the Regal is also built in China, you know, where it actually does quite well, it's unlikely that we'll see it, you know, get resourced from China, given the current trade situation with China. So it's probable that within the next 12 months, you know, we'll probably see this car get canceled, which is really darn shame because, like I said, there's a lot to recommend about this thing. It's a really sharp looking wagon. It's a good looking car, despite the wheel arch extensions. And it's got a really
despite or because of. They're a nice contrast.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'd say despite. I'd rather have the standard wagon look that you can get on the Insignia in Europe. I mean, you can get it as this TourX type on the Insignia, or you can get it as just a conventional wagon. I would go for the conventional wagon, but I'm weird. What can I say? But it's got a lot of utility. There's a lot of space in the back. If you are someone that has an active lifestyle but doesn't need to go off-roading, or if you like going and haunting estate sales on the weekends and things like that, and you want space to throw stuff in the back, there's plenty of space in this thing. There's more than enough space for dog crates if you want to take your dog somewhere. So there's all kinds of things you can do with it.
You just got a new dog. So did your dog come home in this?
Yes, the dog did come home in it. Unfortunately, sadly, we had to put our old dog to sleep. She was decaying quite badly in recent months. She was old, and so we lost her, but we got a new puppy, and so we took a road trip. My wife and I took a road trip across the state to pick up a new puppy, and she was great in this thing. It's got a nice smooth ride. It's got decent fuel economy. It averaged about 25 miles per gallon. The only powertrain option in the Regal TourX this year is the GM's 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, which in this variant I think has 259 horsepower and 295 foot-pounds of torque. And it's not an especially heavy car. It's about 3,700 pounds. So that's plenty of performance. Plenty of power for this vehicle. Right. And the wagon, the Sportback you can get in front wheel drive or all wheel drive. The wagon is only available in all wheel drive. Which is probably fine. I think most people, will not have an issue with that.
Well, it's also like again, this is your Saab 9.3 Aero wagon. Yes.
No, exactly.
But
although it's a little bit bigger than the last 9.3 was. It's probably closer to a 9.5.
Yeah. Okay. Cargo wise, it's got like 73 and a half cubic feet of space, which
when you fold the back seats down, 73 cubic feet.
That's pretty good. So the Haldex system in it is, I'm sure it's a newer generation, but it's not like a full drag kind of all-wheel drive system either. So it's a twin clutch system that completely decouples when it's when you don't need the extra traction to the rear wheels. It'll operate in front wheel drive mode and decouple. The one thing I did notice, and I'm pretty sure that this is actually an issue with the all wheel drive rather than the transmission, is sometimes under some hard acceleration you can feel it. It feels like you can feel the center clutch, the clutch pack engaging. So there's a slight jerk. It's not real objectionable, but it is noticeable. Oh, is it like if you take off hard or something?
Yeah. So as it's starting to pick up, you'll feel just a little bit of a jerk as it engages the torque transfer to the rear axle. It could be a transmission shift issue, but I don't think it is. I think it is the twin clutch unit, because most all-wheel drive systems that you find in cars these days use viscous couplings, where there's it's a fluid coupling, so there's no hard engagement of it. It's a smoother system, but it's also not as efficient, and you don't get as much maximum torque transfer. With a twin clutch system, you can do more torque transfer. It's a more efficient system, but the downside, and you can completely decouple it. The downside is that sometimes under certain conditions you can feel it engaging or disengaging, and so that was there. Like I said, it's not objectionable, but it is noticeable.
Yeah, well, and the Haldex preloads their the rear drive shaft too. So so that once it decides it needs power back there, it's almost instantaneous. There's no sort of like waiting.
Right.
So that I don't know if that makes it smoother or less smooth.
I think what it does. It's hard to say. I think it depends a lot on probably on the way, the specifics of how it's calibrated. I think where it can be a benefit is if you're driving in slippery road conditions, which it wasn't very slippery. This past week around here it was well above freezing. But if you're driving in slippery road conditions and you need to go from front wheel drive to all wheel drive quickly, before you spin up the fronts too much, that can give you a quicker engagement. The downside of that is that, you can also sometimes feel it engaging. So it's a trade-off. So you get better performance, but you feel that sometimes. You know what?
We want to feel the machine. We're drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, this thing is actually not a bad value. It starts the TourX starts at just shy of $30,000, and for that you get standard all-wheel drive, you get that turbo 4-cylinder. And the one I was driving, I think, was about 43. That was the Essence model.
That was had the Essence trim, yeah.
Yeah, so it was pretty much loaded. The Essence starts at about 35 and a half, I think, and this one was 43. But the upside of slow sales, it means that there's some pretty good deals to be had on these things. So if you are interested in something like this, and frankly, I think if you're not going to be going off-roading, if you want something that's got a lot of utility, and also has, all-weather traction capability, and, has plenty of room, this is really the kind of car you should be taking a look at.
I mean, it looks like a wonderful wagon with especially an Essence trim. Like, it's got a premium look about it, and you're not going to see them everywhere. And it's very well equipped. It's going to be comfortable. Buicks are pretty nice inside. They're that near luxury brand, if not luxury. And you're going to spend, I don't know, a lot, several thousand more to step into, the nearest Volvo competitor or an Audi or I'm trying to think of what else you're going to compete. Like, you're well below anything from Mercedes for sure.
Yeah. In terms of comparing it, price and capability wise, probably the closest thing would be the Outback. But the Outback, it's a Subaru. It doesn't quite have that upscale feel to it that you're going to get, even on this Buick. It's nice. I'm not putting down the Subarus, but it is a little more utilitarian. Let's put it that way. And so if you want something that is more stylish looking, and I think this is a really great looking vehicle, in either the Sportback or the wagon body style. Personally, I actually prefer the wagon body style in this thing. I think it works really well with the rest of the shape of the car. It's got nice crisp lines to it, and so I think it's absolutely worth taking a look at. And there's some really interesting little design details, like when you look at at the rear corners, there's the chrome strip that runs across the top, from the A pillar across, above the side glass, down the rear pillar, and then it kind of hooks around so that the tail light has it has like an opening in the middle, and then the chrome kind of comes, it looks like it's coming down underneath the top part of the tail light and then hooking around in the middle. So it almost looks like it's kind of holding it all together.
Yeah, and it's like looks like a J or an L.
Yeah,
on the side of the car.
And it's a really nice little design detail, and there's a lot of little things like that about the car that I liked a lot.
On the inside, did you find any of the evidence of sort of bad GM? GMs have this issue. There's good GM and bad GM does some of the old stuff where you've still got a very expensive model, and you've got really crappy looking pieces that are just out in the open with like flash lines and just junky material and stuff. Like, how is that inside? Because in pictures it looks great, but then sometimes the reality is you sit in the car and you're like, well, this stuff should not be here in a car that's, $30,000 or $40,000.
No, I didn't really see that at all in this one, and that some of that may be, due to, its Opel heritage, but, even compared to the previous generation Regal, this definitely felt, more modern, more upscale. The previous gen Regal, was designed in like the 2007, 2008 timeframe, 2009. And it came out in Europe as an Insignia around that timeframe. This one looks and feels more upscale than that one did, and it looks really nicely integrated. Everything fit well. Everything felt really good. So I can't really say I had any significant complaints about the cabin in this one.
Okay. And it comes with Apple CarPlay Standard and Wi-Fi. All GM.
Yep.
Seems like GM wants everything to be a Wi-Fi hotspot. All their cars. So that's actually pretty cool. It's a feature that seems extravagant, but it's pretty handy when you've got multiple people on devices in the car.
No, absolutely. And if you're taking a road trip with the kids, every GM vehicle now has OnStar built in. You get 5 years of basic OnStar basic services included for free. It's built into the price of the car, and you can get. It comes with some cellular data connectivity included as part of that package. If you want more, you can, I think, for like $10 a month more, 10 or $15 a month more, you can subscribe to a data package for the car. And then, if you're taking a road trip, you've got that hotspot in the car, the kid's sitting in the back seat, they want to watch some YouTube or something on their tablets, or on their laptop or play a game. They can do that, and it's, keeps them entertained. They can do stuff while you're on the road. And so I think things like that, actually are really handy to have, and keeps everything a little more calm and serene when you're taking a long trip.
Yeah. It actually, looking through their connectivity, they have what's called connected access, and I'm not sure what the exact details are, but they're saying is 10 years of standard connectivity. And then with that, there's other stuff that you can add to it, and remote access and stuff like that. And you can use their app to make your phone into a fob, basically. So no matter where you are, you can unlock it and start it and all that stuff. Which is that's something that I think Buick
right, and that's something that the GM actually launched back in 2010 with the first generation Volt, is the OnStar remote link capability.
Yeah. I was going to say GM kind of pioneered that. They're not the only ones doing it now, but it is like some of that stuff is cool, and that's I think OnStar doesn't get enough credit. It was a very early telematics system.
It was the first one back in 1996. Yeah.
Like GM has, like, that's a fantastic product, and they've been really, really good at just keeping it up and making it better and improving it. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. One of the things that came up in the past week was there were some stories, that you can now use, if you have a Tesla, you can use their app to precondition the cabin of your car, which I was surprised that you couldn't do from day one.
Before? Yeah.
No. So you could set the temperature and, turn on the seat heaters and stuff like that before you got the car, while it was still plugged in. And actually, that's something that, GM had, from day one in the Volt in 2010 is, the preconditioning the cab. In fact, so did Nissan in the Leaf, so you could use the apps to, set the cabin temperature, and, turn on seat heaters and things like that, while the car was still, essentially, it was under their remote start capability, and since it was an electric vehicle, remote starting basically just meant turning on the climate control.
Yeah. You definitely want to do that from shore power. You don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't, if you can get the cabin up to temperature before you take off, before you unplug the car, then you're still leaving with you're not putting as much load on the battery. And so it doesn't hurt your range as much as if you're using the battery completely to heat the cabin.
Yeah. I'm surprised that was something that Tesla didn't have. Again,
but of course, because Tesla announced it, obviously Elon invented it. So
right, and I was going to say that must be what it is. Like, it didn't exist until they did it. So yeah. But yeah, so how is that latest nav system? Because I haven't had a GM in a while, but it looks like they have updated their infotainment system. It's not. I don't know what they call it in Buick. It's not. It's not MyLink, right?
IntelliLink.
But it's essentially like it's the same platform.
It's the same. Yeah, I mean, basically, over the last several years, they've consolidated everything onto a single platform. Back in 2011 when they first launched Chevy MyLink, over the course of a couple of years, between 2011 and 2013, as they rolled out these infotainment systems, they had I think they had four different architectures, that were based on the different electrical architectures of the vehicles. And then over time, as they redesigned each of the platforms, they commonized a lot of that electrical architecture and got them all onto the same system, which was based on the platform of Cadillac Q. So Cadillac Q was, the high-end system, and they basically moved everything over to that and upgraded that significantly as well. The early Cadillac Q systems were a bit underpowered. They were a bit slow. The current stuff that you'll find in all the GM vehicles is got plenty of, it's responsive and, everything works well. The interface is fairly clean and uncluttered. It's basically, the main screen's a grid of icons. You have a couple of pages of that you can swipe through to get to your nav and your media settings and things like that. All the climate control, you've got standard, rotary knobs and switches to handle the things you use most often, and then the rest of the stuff that's within the touch interface, it works just fine. And as you said, it's got standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto support, so it all just works.
Yeah, well, I mean that's good. My early experience with Q was not great. Yeah. I didn't like it. So, I mean, this car is like, it's a rolling damn shame, because it's everything that we say we want, right? At least those of us who are a certain class of enthusiast, I suppose. It's a wagon. It's comfortable.
Hey, don't start any class warfare here now.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like,
in a certain segment of
It's pretty to look at. It's comfortable. I'm sure it's quiet. It's probably decently relaxing to drive.
And one of the things I liked about this one is the Regal. They've got several different wheel and tire options, but the biggest wheel option is an 18-inch wheel.
Yeah.
Which means that
even more.
Right. So, even, on an 18-inch wheel, the 235/50 series, it's still got a decent enough sidewall. So, one day, we're coming home on a back road. It was a gravel road and, had a few potholes. And, it does fine absorbing that stuff. So it gives you a better ride quality. And you don't need 22, 23-inch wheels on a car, on a car you're going to drive on the road.
Every year I swap the 18s on the Jeep, the 3-season tires for the winter tires, basically. Mm-hmm. And it has 18s, but that's a big tire on that thing. It's a 265 something. Yeah. I think it's like 265/60. That's a big ass tire. They weigh so freaking much.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing about big wheels and tires is they are really heavy. And that, so it hurts the car in multiple ways. It looks cool, but you've got a lot more inertia, which means that when you hit a bump or you hit a pothole, you're going to feel it a lot more. And then that's amplified by the fact that, as you get to bigger and bigger tires, you have lower and lower profile tires. And an important part of your suspension system in the car is the tire itself. The tires, have compliance in them. They flex as you hit bumps and expansion strips and potholes. And, if you have a really low profile tire, there's not much sidewall to absorb any of that, to absorb the road texture. And so you end up with both worse ride quality and more noise being transmitted through. And because of all that mass, it also hurts your handling. So you're not gaining anything in handling. The reason why we started going to bigger wheels in the first place was to accommodate larger brakes. because back in the 80s when we were running everything on 13 and 14-inch wheels, there was a physical limit on how much brake you could fit inside that wheel.
Yep.
But now, as we get into to bigger and bigger wheels, wheels, we can put more brake in there, and that allows us, that allows us to have better braking performance. But the brakes, as you get bigger brakes, they also get heavier. So there's kind of a limit, essentially on, except for the highest performance cars. The highest performance cars, you got about 15-inch rotors on there now, and you can do that in like an 18 or 19-inch wheel. That you don't need to go any larger than that. And most cars you can get by just fine with a 16 or 17-inch wheel and accommodate any brakes you're going to put in there. So going to bigger brakes means, or bigger wheels means it's going to take longer to stop. You're going to have worse ride quality, worse handling. And it does nothing good for the car except, perhaps the way it looks, depending on your sense of style, but it's not worth the trade-offs.
No, I got very used to being able to like one-handedly move around, 14 and 15-inch wheels. But anyway, I just like the damn shame about the Regal is that nobody's going to buy it, and they're going to discontinue it for the U.S. because nobody's going to buy it. That makes me sad. So, if you want a car like this, go out and get one. You can probably get one of these loaded Regals for, probably somewhere in the mid 30s, maybe even less than that, maybe even low 30s right now with some of the deals that are out there. And you have a great car, at a pretty decent price point. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's, and you can get a variety of different colors. Some of them look really sharp on it. Like there's a dark blue and a very nice red. And anyway, I'm pretty impressed with the Regal, and it just leads me back to that other GM thing that they tend to do is they make the cars really good and then they cancel them. Yeah. Like we figured it all out. It's perfect now. And it's the last year for it. Yeah, I know. In this business, or really in any business, just making a great product isn't enough. You have to figure out how to sell it too. You have to figure out how to get people to buy it. It's the reality is just because you build it doesn't mean they will come. You have to get the message out there about who this product is for, what it can do, and convince people to try it out. And this is something that in a lot of ways, GM and a lot of manufacturers have struggled with over the years. I mean, certainly Ford has had issues with that. And most, many, GM has had a lot of issues with trying to get their message out there about what these different vehicles are and what they can do. So hopefully, if you're listening, if you're interested in this kind of vehicle, go take a look at the Regal and, give it a shot. Take it out for a test drive. I mean, I think you have to attempt to actually sell the cars if you want to sell them. And I don't see a lot of that. And especially if it's like a brand that isn't on everybody's mind. What I see is that all automakers are kind of floundering around trying to figure out how to harness social media and influencers and that kind of stuff. And I think the money that they put into that, they might be able to take a more sort of consultative, experiential, boutique sales experience, and get the cars in front of the people and move that money there instead of just throwing product at people who may have a lot of followers and may post a little bit but don't get you much in return. So it's this weird thing where they're trying to figure it out, and eventually they will. I just I don't know what the damage in between is going to be. Yeah. All right, shall we move on? Yeah, let's hit some topics. I think first things first. We had a Facebook message. Yes, and since I'm no longer on Facebook, I didn't see this, but fortunately our friend Dan Mosqueda saw it, and he sent us a screenshot of it last night. So Yeah.
So this came from Greg Stewart. And I'll read it. It says, "Hi guys, become a big fan of the podcast and listen to every one you post. Thank you very much, Greg. We appreciate that. I like that you drive and review a wide range of vehicles from exotics to the everyday types that most of us drive. We bought a Bolt last year in part based on your opinions. It's a great car. I also enjoy the random topics that you guys cover. Thank you very much again. And looking to replace a 1997 GMC Safari. And for those of you that don't remember the Safari, back in the 1990s, GM had a line of mid-size vans. So, they had the big vans, the big, well, these days they call them the Chevy Express and the GMC Savannah, but the traditional full-size vans.
It was what was it? The Vandura?
Yeah, that was back in the 70s and into the 80s. I think they called it the Vandura. But they had the Chevy Astro and GMC Safari, which were these a little bit smaller rear drive vans. I think they were actually based on the
S10s.
The S10 truck platform.
So complete aside, you could take an Astro or Safari and put a Cyclone or Typhoon powertrain in it.
Ooh.
Just saying. Turbo V6, all-wheel drive, faster than a Ferrari of the same
in a straight line.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Once you throw curves in there, is a totally different story. But
anyway, yeah. Sorry.
Anyway, so Greg's looking to replace the Safari with something equally as utilitarian, but in a plug-in hybrid form factor. Looks like his only choice is the Pacifica Hybrid. I was hoping GM would come up with something comparable on the Voltec platform. That's the Chevy Volt platform. But they're moving too slowly in that direction. Safari needs new tires, and that would triple the value of it. Okay. So I would like to do something soon. Even if they did, it would probably be much smaller than either the Safari or the Pacifica Hybrid. I scanned back through the archive, and the closest thing I could find was a review of the Pacifica. To a review of the Pacifica Hybrid was the standard drive one in episode 12. Might be mistaken, but I'd like to give it a listen. I'll give it a listen. Anyway. Yes, we actually did talk about the Pacifica Hybrid on two different episodes. Episode 22 was the first instance when I drove it, and then again in episode 67 when you had one, Dan. Yep. And we'll include those links in the show notes. But let's kind of revisit the Pacifica Hybrid a little bit.
Sure. The best thing I can say about the Pacifica Hybrid is that the hybrid stuff didn't stick out, it was a normal experience. It got good fuel economy. I believe it had, and I didn't try it, but I believe it had like the plug-in capability and stuff.
That even though they only call it a hybrid, they don't call it a plug-in hybrid. It is in fact a plug-in hybrid.
Right. So, and I think it gets 12 or it's got a low amount of EV only miles.
Actually, it's EPA rated at I think 33 or 34.
Oh, that's pretty good. See, it's good that we're revisiting it because I don't remember all that much about that stuff. I mean, the Pacifica itself is a great van. What I do like about it is that even in hybrid form, it's still fully utility. You don't really pay for it. The only thing you miss is the stow and go.
Yeah. And unfortunately, because, they had to put the battery somewhere to do a plug-in hybrid. And the easiest space for them to use was the cavity below the seats where which is normally used for the stow and go for the second row seats. So if on other Pacificas, if you can open up the flap on the floor there and drop the second row seats down into these two cavities in the floor. With the Pacifica Hybrid, they use that space for the battery. It's a 16 kilowatt hour battery pack. And so as a result, you lose that stow and go. You can still take the seats out. And the third row seats, still flip back into the cavity at the back of the cargo bay. So you still have a flat load floor back there, but up front you can pull the seats out in the traditional way that as you would on other vans. And I just checked fueleconomy.gov, the EPA website, and the Pacifica Hybrid's rated at 33 miles of electric only driving. And what Chrysler did with this thing, and it's similar to the strategy they've taken with the mild hybrids on the Wrangler and on the Ram 1500s, is they're trying to keep it as simple as possible. They're not necessarily trying to appeal to a green audience, but to appeal to a mainstream audience that are interested in just getting, good fuel efficiency and having a really functional vehicle. So, if you get into like a Prius plug-in hybrid or some other plug-in hybrids, you'll find all kinds of, oddball stuff. There's you can just buttons for EV only modes, and it can get confusing for average consumers, that just want to get in and drive. And so what they did is they kept it as close as possible to the conventional Pacifica. So there's no EV only modes. There's no special displays. It just shows you, the only thing it shows you in the cluster is, how much electric range you have left. And it's basically, you come home at night, you plug it in, you unplug it in the morning when you leave, and you get, somewhere between 30 and 35 miles of all electric driving before the engine starts to run. So for most people, you can do your daily commutes and errands and stuff without ever using any gas in this thing, as long as you just plug it in at night.
And I think that was sort of what I meant to say there. Like, the point I was trying to make was, like, it doesn't feel vastly different. It's not like the Prius of minivans.
Right.
It's another option. I do remember being a little bit disappointed that you don't have control over when you can use the EV mode, but that's not a huge sort of point of detraction. Like, especially because it's a minivan, the solid assumption is that when you head out, you're going to be heading out to do those tasks, those sort of like daily commute tasks, and you'll be in town. You're either taking the kids to school or whatever. So
drop the kids off at school or play dates or soccer practice or whatever, and just never use any gas. And I think for the audience that this vehicle is intended for, I think that's fine. Because I think most people, once they get over the novelty of having that, people don't want to mess around with all the different modes. They just want to do what they need to do with a vehicle and be done with it.
Yeah, and so it's the only game in town if you want a hybrid minivan. And that's the other thing I'm trying to look at is I thought I had heard that there was going to be a hybrid Honda Odyssey coming at some point.
Yeah, I think they haven't officially announced it, but Honda has said that they're going to move towards offering electrified versions of everything that they have, and so I would guess that we will see a hybrid version of the Odyssey before long, because consider that the Odyssey shares its basic platform with the Pilot and the RDX, the Acura, or not the RDX, the MDX, and the MDX is now available with a hybrid, and so probably within the next 12 to 18 months we will see a hybrid. Probably when they do the mid-cycle refresh on the Odyssey, so probably sometime later next year we'll see an Odyssey hybrid appear with basically the same powertrain that's in the MDX, and perhaps even with all-wheel drive. But that's going to be probably at least a year away before we see that. So in the meantime, this is basically the only vehicle in this class. If you're looking for something with combination of cargo and people hauling capability, something like a van, to replace a 20-year-old Safari, this is the only and frankly a great option. And the other thing to keep in mind is because FCA has not sold that many plug-in vehicles, they still have you can still get the full $7,500 federal tax credit on this thing. And I don't know where you live, Greg, but in some states you can also get state tax incentives on a plug-in. So starting price on the Pacifica Hybrid is about $40,000. So with the $7,500 tax credit, you're looking at about 32 and a half or so. Between 32 and a half and 37 to 40 for a fully loaded one. So you're getting a lot for that price point.
Well, and my experience with FCA dealers has been that they are more than willing to talk about what it's going to take to get you to drive away in that car today. Yeah. My brother-in-law was talking about the Ram, and he's like, yeah, a bunch of people at where he works just like showed up in the same week with brand new Rams of the last generation. He's like, yeah, they were just like blowing them out for like 15 grand off. I was like, yeah, that's if they're not selling some of those things that they've got in inventory, they'll make you a deal. To me, if the Pacifica's not doing it for you, it might make more sense to wait. Like, yes, I understand you don't want to put tires on the old vehicle because it's not worth it. But if it's a safety issue and it's rusty, because Safaris up here have all rusted away. But if it's that, yeah, get rid of it. But if it's just you're tired of it, it's an old car or whatever, you put the tires on it and just drive it for a year. Put cheap tires on it. Go to, not Chinese tires, but like go to, I don't know, Discount Tire or something. I'm trying to think of like other parts of the country. They don't have the same chains as we do up here in New England, but there's decent tires you can
there's
put
Tire
on.
Rack and Discount and Bell Tire and various other ones. Yeah. The other thing to consider, given the fact that the kind of the way the industry is going in response to what customers are actually buying, there's also going to be a bunch more options this year in the utility sector. So, I can fully sympathize with preferring to stay with a van form factor rather than go to an SUV. But coming up in the spring, there will be an all new Ford Explorer, which is based on the same platform as the Lincoln Aviator that we saw a couple weeks ago in LA. And that Explorer is almost certainly going to have a plug-in hybrid variant as well, similar to what's in the Aviator. It will certainly have at least a hybrid, but I think it's also going to have a plug-in hybrid variant because they've already said that the Police Interceptor utility, which is based on the Explorer, is going to be available as a plug-in hybrid. So presumably the conventional version, the civilian version, will also have the plug-in hybrid available as an option. So that's another alternative. And one of the things that Ford has done with the design of that platform is they've designed the platform to accommodate the batteries for hybrids and plug-in hybrids, which means that the plug-in hybrid variant doesn't have, the battery doesn't intrude into the cargo space. It's actually packaged underneath the floor, under the second row seats, similar to the Pacifica, but only on the right, the passenger side of the vehicle. Gas tanks on the driver's side, and so you can fold the second and third row seats down. You're probably not going to get quite as much space in there, because it's got conventional doors as opposed to sliding doors. It's not going to be as utilitarian as a van, but it's another option to consider.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if you want more efficiency or a newer van, you could also check out some of the options that we've got now that are going to be way more efficient than the Safari, such as the Ford Transit Connect or the Ram ProMaster City or ProMaster or the Ford Transit. All of those are
except I don't think it sounds like he doesn't want to go that small.
Right, and so that's I don't know. Can you get a ProMaster, not the City, but a ProMaster in a passenger configuration? I don't
yes,
know.
you can.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah.
Because those, even the ProMaster is certainly the same size, or if not a little larger than the Safari.
Oh, it's quite a bit larger than the Safari.
It's got a much newer power.
Actually, the Transit Connect.
I
think might be the closest in size to the Safari.
Yeah, and then just like the regular Transit too, not the high roof one or whatever. You can get a low roof Transit in a passenger configuration. That may also be a little bit more than you want to spend, but that is a fantastic vehicle.
Yeah, you can. Actually, I don't think you can get the Transit 150 with the diesel. No. I think it's only the 250 and 350 is available with the diesel.
Yeah, I think the only engine for the Transit 150 actually is the 3.7.
Yeah. So, there's some other options to consider out there, but yeah, maybe take a look at the Transit Connect and see if that's big enough for you. Cause it's actually surprisingly roomy, even though it's relatively small on the outside. And, because it's front wheel drive, it's got a lower floor than the Safari did. One of the issues with the Safari and the Astro, because it was based on that S10 platform, which was rear wheel drive, it had a relatively high cargo floor. And so, for its size, it was not, hugely roomy inside compared to some other options. So you might want to take a look at the Transit Connect, the Ford Transit Connect, especially the long wheelbase version, and see if that's big enough for you, because, that's, it's got, I think almost 1,700 pounds of payload capacity, in that thing. And it's surprisingly large inside. The current generation one is based on the mid-roof version that they have in Europe.
Yeah. It's the classic, like the original minivan formula. It's Focus platform hardware.
Yep.
And it's small front wheel drive passenger car stuff, and they made a van out of it. It's not like even the Pacifica now, which is its own sort of dedicated platform, and it's not shared with any cars. Chrysler doesn't make any cars anyway. but you know what I'm saying? It's like it goes back to that. So it's not.
Well, they still have the 300.
That's true. A 300 base van would actually be kind of cool. But the Transit Connect goes back to that original formula where it's C-class car components made into a van, so it mostly drives like a C-class car, which it's a good thing. And it to me, like that's a minivan, and it should work just fine. But it also gets like supposedly 24 in the city, 29 on the highway. And
there's also a diesel coming to the Transit Connect in the spring.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, they're launching a version with a diesel engine. So, just looking at the no, it doesn't have the specs and the passenger cargo specs. I'm looking at the old on the fueleconomy.gov site to see if they have the volume, the cargo volume in here, but they don't list it for that one. So yeah, I'll take a look after we're done and add it to the show notes, to see what the cargo volume compared to the Safari compared to the Transit Connect was.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth checking out anyway. And unless you want to wait until there's some more options, throw some tires on the thing, and at that point, at least, you've spent the money on the tires and not a monthly payment, and they're kind of even out, right? One set of tires equals a monthly payment for some kind of car. So, but just one, you pay once and you're done. So I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, let's hit up on another topic. Let's see. We've got a couple. Do we want to dive right into Tesla, or do we want to talk about a couple other things first?
Let's see. You know what? We've been going 52 minutes. Let's skip Tesla for now and go to the other stuff.
Okay.
I don't really want to talk about the Tesla board of directors. But Porsche Taycan Turbo. Taycan.
Taycan?
Saying that wrong. It's Taycan, yes.
Taycan.
Porsche says it's Taycan.
Taycan.
No, it's Taycan.
Why did they name it? Why did they give it a number? Like, couldn't they give it like a 9 something? Like, whatever. 914?
No, that's been used. Can't do that one. So anyway, yeah, the Taycan for those that haven't been paying attention is Porsche's first EV. It's coming out in the spring. It's the production version of what we saw as the Mission E concept a couple of years ago. And we've got some new information about it this week. Base price is going to start in the low 90s. So similar in price to a comparably equipped Model S. And, of course, because it is a Porsche, you will be able to escalate that price fairly rapidly with injudicious use of the option sheet. And this applies to all Porsches and frankly all German cars. You can rapidly escalate the price by adding stuff, and depending on how much you want to personalize it, Porsche will be more than happy to take your money for any degree of personalization that you want. But one of the interesting things that came out this week is their choice to for badging for the performance version of the Taycan, which will apparently be called the Taycan Turbo, in keeping with the 911 Turbo and various other Porsche turbos over the years.
But to be clear, it's not anything to do with like having an internal combustion engine that's turbocharged. Even as
right, there is no internal combustion, there is no turbocharger, but it's more like think about it, back in the old days of PCs that used to have a turbo button on the side, the front, that you could press the turbo button and kind of crank up the clock speed on the processor.
Right, and your what was it, the 486 DX2 had the math coprocessor. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, I had my first PC was a 286 with a 287 math coprocessor.
There you go.
And a turbo button on the front of the case.
Yeah. What did the turbo button actually do on those? It didn't increase the overall clock speed, did it?
It was hard to tell because they were so slow.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. In some cases, I think it actually did increase the maximum clock speed. In some cases, in normal mode, it would run at a slower clock speed. So, it was more that it was when the turbo button was not on, it was underclocked, as opposed to, overclocking it, so you were just getting the maximum that you paid for when you press the turbo button.
Makes no sense to me. But anyway, of course the turbo button's always press. Right.
So, of course. So, they will apparently be calling the performance version of the Taycan the turbo, because that's in keeping with the Porsche brand.
Well, and I think that's actually smart. We can poke holes at it as car people and say, well, actually, there's no turbocharger. But I don't think it matters. I think that people understand that, hey, turbo is supposed to equal powerful and fast. It doesn't matter how it achieves that power or speed. It's just that that turbo is shorthand for performance. Done. That's easy. There was some confusion about whether Porsche was actually going to call its charging network turbochargers, though, right? That's still that's
yeah. Well, Porsche's not going to have the Porsche brand is not going to have its own charging network. Porsche dealers, because Porsche is part of the Volkswagen Group, when you buy a Taycan or any other Porsche EV, you will have access to you'll get some free charging at Electrify America stations, and those are owned by Volkswagen Group. And then Porsche dealers will every Porsche dealer will have a 350 kilowatt charger on site as well. And so they may or may not call those turbochargers. We'll see. Hey, if you can call what Tesla has superchargers, why not call it a turbocharger? I mean, it's just meaningless branding anyway. So.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty good slap at Tesla. And, for my money, I would very much consider a Porsche EV before I considered a Tesla, not because of Tesla, performance or technology or whatever, but because of Porsche performance and technology and their capability of just building a really solid automobile. They know how to make the cars and make them really well, and they're very careful engineers. And I think they both have their share of just organizational chaos going on. So I don't know. I've been a lot more impressed with the Porsches that I've been in and driven and seen in terms of just being really thoughtfully built and engineered cars than the Teslas I've kind of looked at.
Yeah, I could not disagree with that. So, all right, moving on. We also had some news from Hyundai the other day that they are going to add fingerprint sensors starting on the Santa Fe in 2019 in certain markets. They haven't said exactly where yet, but the fingerprint sensor will be on the door handles and on the start-stop button in place of using a key fob.
Yeah. And my assumption is that people are expecting me to hate this idea for a lot of reasons. At least the people that know me, because they tend to think that I'm rather paranoid about that kind of stuff. And I do take security and my data and privacy very carefully. But I honestly don't have a problem with this. I've got a fingerprint sensor on my MacBook Pro, and it's very handy. You don't have to type in your password. It works nicely.
I've had fingerprint sensors on my last 3 phones, and it is great. And the thing is, in this case, in this kind of application, it will actually probably be more secure than using the fob. Because one of the issues we've had with key fobs in the last few years is we've had some security issues because of the way that they work. Where the car itself is actually broadcasting a signal that authenticates with the fob.
Right.
So the car has a longer range. It's broadcasting more power, more powerful signal than the key fob itself. So the key fob has a shorter range signal. So when you're within range of the car, the fob will detect the signal from the car, but it's not until you get to within about 3 to 5 feet of the car that the authentication signal from the key will reach the car, and so then then it'll unlock, and you can, once you get in, you can start the car. The problem with that mechanism is that some hackers have figured out that you can do what's known as a relay attack. So for example, if you're sitting in a restaurant or even sitting in your house and your car is parked out on the street or out in your driveway, you can for fairly little money, you can build a little device that will pick up the signal from the car, and then they can sit outside the building where you're sitting. If they're within range of your key, it will pick up the authentication signal from your key. The key won't be within range of the car, but it can pick that up and rebroadcast that to the car, and then unlock the car, and then they can drive away with your car. And so this has happened. BMW had an issue. They had to do a big recall to update software on I think a couple million of their cars in Europe. Tesla has had issues with this. Other manufacturers have had issues with the same kind of attack, and they're finding ways around that. But the very fact that you don't actually have to have physical contact with the vehicle, can be problematic. There's anytime that there's wireless signals bouncing around, those can be intercepted, and bad guys can do stuff with it. So having a fingerprint, having a biometric identification that you have to actually be in physical contact with the vehicle to use is actually not such a bad thing. Now, one of the things I saw somebody post on Twitter last night was that this would actually be great for shared vehicles. It'd be a great way for authentication for shared vehicles.
Well, and they talk about that.
Yeah, well, that's where I draw the line. I think it's actually a really bad idea for shared vehicles. I think it's great for your own vehicle, but for shared vehicles, it's not a good idea.
Well, when I think of shared vehicles, I still think sort of a little bit more insular, like shared amongst a family. Like how I have a fob and my wife has a fob.
For that, I mean, this particular instance that I'm referring to, they're talking about like for mobility services, for car sharing, ride hailing, that sort of thing, as an authentication system.
Yeah, no,
and that's where you don't want to do it for that. For shared, within a family, it's great because everybody can program their fingerprint into the car, and then that can be tied to their own personal settings. So you press your finger on the sensor on the door, and it can preset the seat and the steering wheel and the mirrors and everything, and your favorite radio stations. Somebody else gets in, they presets theirs, and even you have fingerprint sensors on the driver and passenger side, and so depending on who's driving, whether it's one spouse or the other, whoever's in the driver's seat, they press and it sets the seat for their preferences. So then, if you trade places, when you get in the car, it, automatically does that. So that's actually really handy. But what you don't want to do is use this for more broadly shared mobility service vehicles.
Well, I don't understand why you'd need a fingerprint sensor for cars like that anyway, given that you can just unlock those cars and get into them with you could do that with an app-based approach.
Right. Well, I think the idea in theory, is that you don't even have to have the phone. You don't even have to use a phone or use an app to do that. You can just walk up to the car, put your finger on there and authenticate, and the car will unlock, and you can drive off, and it will charge your account and everything as needed. But the problem with that is now your biometric data is stored somewhere where you don't control it.
Right. That's like iris scanning. It's like, no, that's fine. I'll have the inconvenience. Thank you. But I think for like a personally owned vehicle, it's a really good idea. It makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
It does get you out of that sort of radio communication way of getting into the cars, and so that's really elegant. Now what they have to figure out is, okay, what if the battery's dead? How do you get into the car to say pop the hood?
But I mean that's an issue even if you've got a fob.
Oh yeah. No, I get it. I'm just now clicking off okay, if you have a fob, you still have to have some way to get into the car if the fob's battery is dead or the car's battery
Yeah, and you're even with the fingerprint sensor, you're still going to have a key as a physical key as a backup system. You still need to have some physical mechanism to get into the vehicle, even if the battery's dead or whatever, if for some reason it can't read your fingerprint. If you've used a fingerprint sensor, on a phone, sometimes your fingerprint's wet or if it's too cold, you still want some backup mechanism to get into the vehicle.
No, but it's an elegant move by Hyundai, and a Hyundai of all companies too. It seems like
and I think this system is it's probably the one a system that was devised by Synaptics. I talked to the guys from Synaptics a few months ago, and they've been working on this for car applications, using fingerprint sensors both for access to the vehicle and also access in the vehicle to access certain services and things like that and settings. You're right. It is a very elegant solution.
Yeah, and it's when they talk about it in the article, the piece from The Drive that talks about it, they say that over time it will actually get better. It'll learn your fingerprints better as you continue to use it. So it should actually become more accurate and more, more error free as your ownership experience goes on, obviously to a point. But it's instead of debuting on something in the high end, it's the 2019 Santa Fe, which is that's solidly in the middle of everything. So that's
and
really
they haven't said, they said it'll be in selected markets. They haven't said where, so I don't know if it'll be here in the U.S. at launch or not. But at some point, it'll probably get here. It'll
wind up here at some point. We'll get it. I like it a lot better than the idea of turning your phone into a key fob or something too. I like elegant solutions. That seems like an elegant solution. I'll get one as a press car eventually and complain about it.
Yeah. Well, that's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So,
let's see. I think we also had one question from Twitter. Yes. From Florian. He asked, not sure if we've already have an episode on different aero bits on cars today. A breakdown of wings, spoilers, dams, diffusers, etc., and their perceived versus real effects for daily drivers would be great. We can cover both engineering. We cover both engineering and sales, so I trust you to clear the air.
Nice.
So,
I like what
tell us about aero.
Aero. So most of the stuff that you see as obvious aero is just nonsense. Most of the stuff you have to look for is real. Pay attention to areas like around the mirrors and on the edges of the car, like the tail lights often, and you'll see these little bumps. They're sort of like lozenge shaped, I don't know how else to describe them. They're tapered and elongated. Those are vortex generators, and they smooth the airflow as it goes around things and detaches from the car for less wind resistance. Underneath any modern car, you can see all sorts of covers and panels and NACA ducts and stuff to put the air where they want it to go. There's usually now what I'm seeing is there's an opening in the wheel liners to let the high pressure air from the front air dam, the lower part of the front air dam, flow through and come out there and create a bubble around the wheels, which again smooths wind resistance and increases fuel economy. So there's all kinds of aero all over everything that you don't necessarily notice.
That last one is kind of an interesting one. It's called air curtains. And one of the biggest sources of drag on the car is your wheels rotating. That the wheels, as the wheels rotate, especially at highway speeds, generates a lot of turbulence. And so what you mentioned there, that little slot, and if you look at the leading edge of the wheel well, and then you look from the front, usually somewhere near somewhere in the front corners, you'll find there's a vertical slot where the air can pass through there. And so it's taking that high pressure air off the front, as you said, and it's directing it and basically creating a curtain of air that flows across the surface of the wheel, and helps reduce the drag. And I've been told that it can reduce the drag by the drag coefficient by up to about I think 8 to 10 counts of CD. So like if the
that's crazy.
So that's 8 to 10 hundredths. So like without the air curtain, if the drag coefficient was 0.33, for example, that might cut it down to 0.32. Or 0.32 and 322, something like that.
Okay, that's not quite as big as I thought, but it's still big.
But it's not an insignificant amount. And the other thing, other major sources of drag, on the car, are obviously the mirrors. And the other thing with the mirrors is not just drag, but also wind noise. That's an area where you get a lot of noise, and it's noise that tends to be noticeable inside the cabin.
Yeah.
And so, as you said, you'll see that, if you look at the mirror housings, on a lot of newer cars, you'll find little ridges, little bumps. And what those are doing is, trying to control the airflow over the mirror housing, and, reduce the wind noise there. Another spot where there's a lot of air drag generated is as the air comes off the back of the car. Yeah. We've all seen the concept cars from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The classic teardrop shape, is that minimal aerodynamic drag shape. But obviously, it's not practical to put this long tapered teardrop on the back of a car. Yeah,
and that's not actually as good as you might think either. Especially, I think was it Cam who did all the experiments about having an abrupt rear to the shape that actually detaches more efficiently or something from that. I forget. It's complicated.
But you still need to control that airflow off the back, as it comes off the back of the body. Yeah. And so what you'll find on a lot of modern cars is you'll find these kind of vertical ridges, molded into the shape of the bumper or the rear metal, around the back edge. If you look at almost any modern car, you'll see these various ridges and sharp edges. And what those are there for is to control that, to manage that airflow, the separation of the airflow coming off the back. Because without that, if you just had a smooth surface that curved around the back of the car, then the airflow will tend to follow that bodywork, and then you get all this turbulence behind the car, and it generates a lot of drag.
So is that like the idea of a diffuser, where you're actually taking the airflow that goes under the car like a tunnel, and then you're creating a pressure drop. So the diffuser.
Well, that's actually different. That the diffuser is more for downforce. So that's something that came out of racing.
You turn the car into a wing.
Right. So the diffuser, takes that underbody airflow and creates a low pressure zone at the back end of the car to try to suck the car down. And on road cars, you'll see, a lot of, road cars that have something that looks like a diffuser on a race car that's not actually very effective in most cases. It's more for show in most cases, although it's not always. I mean, in some cases it is actually effective and generates some downforce, but usually only on really high performance cars. But on on a lot of other cars, you'll see that. But just in general, you'll see these sharp edges that are, subtle, ramps and things like that have been molded into the bodywork at the back end of the car to manage that airflow, so that instead of wrapping around the back in that turbulent fashion, it flows back and kind of, if you actually, look at the airflow and, you go into a wind tunnel with, where they've got the little smoke generators, you'll see the air coming off the back of the car and, flowing back as if there was that teardrop shape back there, but without actually having anything physically there.
Yeah.
And then, the other thing is active aerodynamics that we're starting to see, with the most common form of that being the active grille shutters.
Right. And that's subtle. That's on all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't think.
It's increasingly becoming, standard on most new vehicles. I think the first one in North America to get it was the first generation Chevy Cruze, back in 2010. When it launched, it had active grille shutters on the Eco model, and now they're putting them standard on almost everything. So basically, again, one of the main sources of drag is the air flowing through the engine compartment. And you need some of that for cooling the engine. But, depending on the load conditions and, ambient temperature and everything else, you don't necessarily need all the airflow through there. So if you can block that off, then you can dramatically reduce the drag of the vehicle, in a very simple and cost-effective way, and then when you need, when the engine's under load and you need to do more cooling, you can just open them up and let extra airflow through there.
Because if it goes into the engine compartment, it has to go out of the engine compartment.
Yes.
So, that's an issue you've got to then sort out. And it seems easy, but then when you get past sort of theory and design, you've got to figure out ways to get it in and out cleanly, and take that heated air and move it elsewhere. And I don't know whether it usually I think it goes probably under at this point once it's been heated.
Some of it goes under, some of it goes up, under the back edge of the hood, and up over the windshield. So those are the two main places where it goes.
Yeah, because it would. There's that low pressure area behind the front wheels that fancy cars, sporty cars sometimes have fake vents there. That's also a good place to vent it, because you'll get the high pressure at the front and the low pressure at the back, so it'll flow from high to low, and it'll just vent the air, the engine compartment very nicely. But I don't know what that does to the airflow on the side of the car. So,
and this is one of the interesting things in aerodynamic development over the last 10 or 15 years. I guess probably going back to the early 2000s is when they really started doing this. When they're designing new cars, before they build a full scale model and put it in the wind tunnel, they'll do simulation. They'll do computational fluid dynamics simulation.
Yep.
And so one of the big areas they focus on with that, is modeling the airflow through the engine compartment. And then the other thing they do, before they build full scale clay models, they'll build 1/3 scale clay models. And again, it's hard to model some of that. It used to be hard to model, that sort of stuff with these 1/3 scale models, but with the advent of 3D printing or additive manufacturing, that's an area where they've been able to actually really improve aerodynamic development, because now you can quickly build a model of the powertrain and suspension, and suspension components are another big source of drag. So you can quickly build a model of that stuff, and then build your clay model, the clay body model around that. And so you can actually physically test, the airflow through the engine compartment and around all the components of the engine, through the radiator, through the engine, and around the engine and everything else. So you can actually have a very detailed physical model and validate that stuff before you build a full-size vehicle.
And that's all very important because you want to break it in the computers before you actually break it.
Long before you start casting parts and machining parts, because that's where changes become very expensive. If you can change that stuff early before you start making full scale parts, it's a lot cheaper than making those changes later on.
Yeah, it wasn't aerodynamics that. In this particular example, but in the book Car by Mary Walton about the development of the 1995 Taurus, basically the last generation Taurus. When they started, one of the goals was to boost the structural rigidity, and they did. The initial design had very strong unibody, but for styling, and they kept taking structure away or just like scooping it out for style. It's a very highly styled car. And they sort of forgot, or it was earlier stages of this, but there was one of those moments where they sort of reran some of the testing and they realized that they had taken away a lot of their body rigidity. And so to get it back, they used a beam across the car. And that was all like they figured that out computer wise before they actually started building prototypes. So we screwed ourselves. We need to put a pipe basically from A pillar to A pillar across the car. And I remember when that car launched, that was one of the big things that they actually used as a press release point, was like, hey, it's got this new cross car beam that makes the structure rigid. It's like, we did that because we screwed up somewhere else. We screwed up and we carved away too much of our structure. It's just interesting, like how that stuff works. And that's an example of it. Like, you don't always have that ability to save your ass. And a lot of people got mad at that move developing the Taurus because every other team, the electrical team, the HVAC team, the interior team, like they needed to now make room for a pipe to go across the car where like defroster ducts and stuff are going to be. So, you don't always have that luxury. It's super, super interesting. And it's a lot more thought about than I think, or a lot more sort of heavily developed than you might think just looking at the car.
Yeah, but if you spend a little time taking a look around the body of any modern vehicle, you'll find all kinds of little details that none of that stuff is put there just. Or most of that stuff is not put there just as flourishes for the designers.
Yeah, it's not the 50s anymore.
Yeah, because the thing is, when you put little extra creases and things like that, that makes it harder to manufacture. It makes it harder to stamp those body panels. So I mean, there's some stuff that's done purely for aesthetics, but there's a lot of little details that are fairly subtle that have a significant impact on the drag. And so now today we have cars that have lower drag than we had 20 years ago, but that don't necessarily look like, in the 1980s and 90s, what we thought of as low drag bodies. They look, more traditional in some respects, because we were able to, find the things that actually really impact the drag and the airflow around the vehicle, in meaningful ways, and focus on those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I hope that we have, provided a significant, look into the aerodynamics on vehicles for our friend Florian. And if there's there's one other detail I forgot to mention.
On a lot of vehicles you have air springs, like for example on the on the Ram.
The Ram,
it has optional air springs.
Yeah.
On the steel, on the versions of the Ram that have steel coil springs, there's actually, there's a front air dam that lowers down at highway speeds, to reduce the airflow under the vehicle and reduce drag. They don't have that on the version with the air springs, because they actually use the air springs to lower the vehicle down instead. So it actually lowers the whole vehicle at highway speeds, which reduces the frontal area of the vehicle and reduces the overall drag.
Yeah.
So there's other things that are not visible, but that actually have an impact on aerodynamics.
Yeah, and I think that low air dam, the GMT 900s had, especially on the SUV versions, they have that air dam that goes like way, way down to the pavement. Mm-hmm. For the same reason, But it wasn't active. It was just like it's there. The Tahoe is going to be 3 inches off the ground. So, But yeah.
All right.
I think that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So we're at the end of 2018, the end of another arbitrary period of time. And we'll be back sometime early in the new year to talk again about what's going on in the car space.
In the meantime, please continue to leave us some feedback and some reviews in iTunes and Apple Podcasts and whatever other app you use for podcatching if it has review capability. And send us questions and we'll try to answer them.
All right. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.